Today is January 31st, 2025. Today we are meeting Meer. Let this part really seep in. This part is easy to get away from us. This being is transmitting to us through a crystal. Before going on to Meer, let me share this just to set a timeline about the crystal herself. So I was first sent out to find the crystal I would work with for this work in the summer of 2009, at the onset of my awakening. At that point, I knew nothing about crystals. I did not know I had this skill. I didn't even so much as have a single crystal in my home. I came out of an experience one morning with the message to go find my crystal. It took me a couple of years to find her, but I did so the first week of May 2011. We bonded together for a few years, roughly 6 years, before our work began, which was in the summer of 2017. When the work first started, it was entire scenes that would come through. Scenes that had to do with my life experiences in multiple spaces and times, multiple forms, multiple bodies, including the one you see here. The very first storyboard that came through was my birth into the earth life, but there were many others as well that involved indigenous people, that involved titans, giants, that involved star seeds and the concept of star seeding. So in other words, the frames contained a lot more data than what we're going to see here in the Contact series. But no one could really see or read that data. So I began focusing more in on the origin points, where it was the information was coming in from. To begin this series, I introduced Quinn because he was the first being to begin appearing so repeatedly, which began, I believe, in February of 2020. But there were many beings who came in prior to him, and we're going to be meeting some of those beings next, beginning here now with Meer. Meer came through June 26, 2018. She's the first being that I captured through the crystal proper, as a being in itself. That frame was not so much a storyboard as it just contained her. So this is where the series first began. The exact time she came in was 8:46:36 in the evening. It's interesting that when I first began practicing with the crystal, it was always in the evening, or generally in the evening, that I would get the crystal out. Meer came through when I was working a home hospice position in El Cajon, California. I myself was living in Alpine, California, about 10 miles east of El Cajon. I would point out here that the portal that opens when one is nearing their transition from this life is filled with information and energy, and the transference of that as well between the spiritual and physical sides of life. So in the beginning, this is how and when and possibly even why the information began coming through. Meer is an aquatic, duck-like species. Many of her species have also come through the crystal. I'm recalling 3 or 4 of them at the moment, but Meer was the first. She's the one that came through the most prevalently. She is my personal contact with this species, and she has contacted me in the out-of-body state. The first contact that I recognized as being a contact from Meer happened, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to look at my dates, happened February 10th, 2023. It happened during the phase when the great virus was sweeping through our world. I had contracted it for the first and only time and was navigating my way through that when one morning it wasn't even morning, it was all evening long into the morning, I was taken into an out-of-body experience. That experience concluded by me appearing on the roof of a parking structure. There are no other cars or vehicles up here. I appeared right in the center of the roof, and there's an operation going on of some kind. Not exactly military. These people, some of them were plainclothed, others were dressed in a navy blue uniform. They're armed with rifles. The feeling here is that they're here to protect me in this environment in which I just appeared, which did contain this species. What I see up here is an ocean liner at port, and at first I see one, but then many as I begin to look more into the environment of this species of being. They're all dressed in hazmat suits. They're in colorful color scheme in shades of peaches and pinks and blues, and the different shades of the peach, pink, and blue represented different jobs that they were here to do. There were various areas that were roped off in a thick white rope. That detail seemed to be important when I was in the experience. I was just trying to look in to the face part of the hazmat suit to see what kind of being was in here. And when I did that, what appeared was this duck-like species. It did waddle. It did give me the impression of having webbed feet. They were just slighter than our normal human would be, just slightly less in height and less in stature than a human female. And this went for their males and their females. In the experience, this is hard to explain. In the experience, there is a feeling of not knowing whether these beings are working with or against us. This is mainly my own feeling, as is usually the case in an out-of-body experience. But what I began to glean is that these beings are helping us clean up some of the toxic waste, including viruses that are created potentially through gain of function from our planet, from our body systems, and transporting it off planet. So although the species itself is not necessarily what we would consider positive, the work that they're doing here, I feel very much is. And yeah, this concludes what I was able to glean from that experience, as well as my last proper experience with and from Meer, with and from a contact from Meer. Now, I mentioned in the first segment, when I'm working with the crystal and receiving the contacts, what I'm aiming for is to be able to capture at least 2/3 of the being's face. But why 2/3? Why is that the minimum requirement? When the beings come through the crystal, I've mentioned they do so in and as one large singular structure that fractals down in and within itself into what seems an infinite stream of beings, of faces, not unlike a Mandelbrot. These beings all overlap, each being sharing an eye with the being next to it. Now, imagine looking down through multiple clear glass planes, and each of the planes, the one on top, the plane on top, containing a certain array of of the data contained in the overall transmission, and each subsequent plane containing other data pertaining to the transmission. Now imagine attempting to align the crystal just right with the sun or the light in order to geometrically capture exactly what it is I'm wanting to snapshot. And you might be able to see that it's not an exact science, and that it does take great skill, and that you're going to be, when you're taking the snapshot, getting not just the being itself, but a lot of the other data in the overall transmission. And so if you've ever seen those, some photographs where a face is coming through an environment and you're getting bits and pieces of the different information all in one snapshot, you'll get a good idea of what I get when I'm taking mine. Now, why at least 2/3 of the being's face? Well, I do this because, well, one, I do this to keep honing my skill. I don't want to give up until I can capture absolutely as much as I can of the beings themselves that I'm hoping to introduce to our consensus world. So the first reason is to, yes, keep honing and advancing and refining the skill. But also what I've learned is that 2/3 of the face is requisite. It's required for when I'm going to go forward and do the mirrors. If you we do the beings again to face front, and we do this for direct eye-to-eye contact. The experience is very different when the beings are looking back at you. You will feel, if you can gaze for any longer than just a moment, your central nervous system begin to perk up, as it were. And that's the central purpose for this work, to help prepare the human central nervous system for first contact. And so again, this is why we're facing the being's front. But when I go ahead and do that, or add that additional element to this work, what I want in the end result is a presence, a face that very much does appear as a real whole being and not something geometrical. So if you get any less than 2/3 of the face, you won't get this very lifelike presence when you do the mirror. What you'll get is something more like a geometry. So like some kind of geometrical structure in which, you get the idea of a face, but nothing like what we're seeing here, which is quite literally like Meer standing right in front of me, looking back at me. So nothing quite this real, nothing quite this lifelike.